Right now, independent garages across the United Kingdom are actively turning away certain popular family SUVs. These aren't exotic Italian supercars or temperamental vintage classics. They are ordinary, driveway-friendly crossovers, hiding mechanical flaws so catastrophic that the repair bill is frequently higher than the total market value of the vehicle itself. When a trusted local mechanic, the bloke who has kept your cars running for decades, flat out refuses to take your money because he doesn't want the legal liability of working on your engine, you know you are dealing with a design disaster. From disintegrating rubber belts that slowly dissolve inside engine oil to timing chains buried in locations where no human hands can reach them without stripping the entire front of the car, we are seeing everyday motorists hit with four-figure repair bills they simply cannot afford. Let's go from bad to worse. We're starting with the least painful and ending with the one luxury SUV that can genuinely bankrupt an unsuspecting owner. Number 6. Nissan Qashqai 1.2 DIG-T petrol. This one genuinely surprised me, simply because of how many of them are parked on British driveways. The second-generation Qashqai was practically the default choice for UK families. The car that invented the modern crossover craze and built a massive reputation on sensible Japanese dependability. But if you bought one with the 1.2-liter DIG-T turbocharged petrol engine, that reputation for reliability is a complete illusion. Underneath the bonnet, undersized piston rings and flawed engine management software lead to extreme oil consumption. The engine quietly drinks its own oil between scheduled services, without displaying any warning light on the dashboard. When the oil level drops, the under-engineered timing chain loses lubrication, stretches, and begins slapping against the casing, eventually throwing the engine out of time and causing catastrophic internal damage. Independent specialists report seeing these engines run completely dry after just a few thousand miles, and replacement quotes from main dealers can easily climb to £5,000 or more. Imagine buying a sensible used family runabout for £7,000, only to discover 6 months later that your engine has literally eaten itself from the inside out. The car isn't just expensive to repair, it turns a dependable school-run runabout into a rolling gamble. And while the Qashqai's engine bay is at least reasonably accessible, our next vehicle shows what happens when engineers decide to put the most fragile part in the absolute worst possible place. Number 5. Vauxhall Mokka 1.6 CDTi. On paper, this was supposed to be the ultimate motorway commuter. Vauxhall heavily marketed this 1.6-liter diesel as the ultra-refined whisper diesel, promising exceptional fuel economy and whisper-quiet running for long-distance drivers. British motorists snapped them up by the tens of thousands on attractive PCP finance deals. The problem is that Vauxhall's engineers made a disastrous design decision. They mounted the timing chain at the rear of the engine, squeezed directly against the gearbox bulkhead. When these chains stretch and the plastic guides degrade, which happens with alarming regularity around 60,000 to 80,000 miles, a mechanic cannot simply take off a side cover to swap the parts. To replace a 150-pound timing chain kit, the entire gearbox has to be dropped, or the whole engine must be hoisted out of the chassis. That turns what should be a standard 400-pound afternoon job into an 80-hour labor nightmare, costing upwards of £1,500 to £2,000. Independent garages loathe doing this job because the profit margin on labor simply isn't worth the risk of tying up an entire workshop ramp for 2 solid days. For an older Mokka worth barely £3,500, a rattling chain effectively writes the car off on the spot. Now, you'd think that a rear-mounted timing chain would be the peak of questionable engineering. It isn't, because number 4 takes mechanical complexity to a level that gives seasoned mechanics a genuine headache. Number 4. Volkswagen Tiguan 1.4 TSI. The strange thing about this car is that it carries the sacred badge of German build quality. Buyers flocked to the early petrol Tiguan, believing they were getting a premium, bulletproof family SUV that would hold its value better than anything from France or Japan. Instead, Volkswagen handed them one of the most unnecessarily complicated engines of the modern era, the twin-charged 1.4 TSI. To squeeze big power out of a tiny engine, Volkswagen fitted both a supercharger for low-end punch and a turbocharger for top-end speed, often pairing it with the dry-clutch 7-speed DSG automatic gearbox. The result is a mechanical minefield. The timing chains are notorious for stretching and jumping teeth, the supercharger clutches frequently seize, and the piston ring lands are prone to cracking under under high boost pressure. When an owner brings one of these into an independent garage with an intermittent misfire and a gearbox warning light, mechanics groan. Diagnosing a fault between the supercharger bypass valve, the turbocharger wastegate, and the notoriously fragile mechatronic gearbox control unit can consume hours of expensive diagnostic time before a single spanner is turned. A total mechatronic replacement alone sits around 1,800 pounds, and a rebuilt engine easily crosses the 3,000 pound mark. That's why many independent workshops will politely hand you your keys back and suggest you try a main dealer. This is where things start getting serious, because the next 3 vehicles on our list don't just suffer from complex engineering, they suffer from a single, catastrophic design philosophy that is destroying engines across the country. Number 3. Ford EcoSport 1.0 EcoBoost. This engine won International Engine of the Year awards, and for a short time, it seemed like Ford had worked a miracle. They extracted remarkable power and low emissions from a tiny 3-cylinder block, making the EcoSport a runaway sales success in British towns and suburbs. Then the reality of the wet belt set in. Instead of using a traditional dry timing belt or a durable steel chain, Ford submerged a rubber timing belt directly inside the engine's hot engine oil. The theory was that oil would reduce friction and improve fuel efficiency. In the real world of British stop-start driving, unburnt petrol degrades the engine oil, and that contaminated oil slowly dissolves the rubber belt. The belt begins to shed teeth and disperse microscopic rubber sludge throughout the engine. This rubber gunk travels straight down into the oil sump, clogging the oil pickup strainer. The dashboard oil light flickers, but by the time you see it, oil starvation has already destroyed the camshafts, the crankshaft bearings, and the turbocharger. In the motor trade, it is universally known as the eco-boom. Replacing the wet belt before it disintegrates is a massively labor-intensive job, requiring specialized locking tools, costing between £950 and £1,650. But if the belt has already shed its teeth, a brand new engine from Ford will cost you upwards of £5,000. On a used EcoSport, that is a fatal financial blow. And Ford wasn't the only manufacturer to fall into the wet belt trap. Number 2 took this exact same flawed concept and put it into one of the most stylish family cars on British roads. Number 2, Peugeot 3008 1.2 PureTech. When Peugeot unveiled the second-generation 3008, it swept automotive awards across Europe. It looked stunning, featured an futuristic aircraft-style interior, and promised exceptional fuel economy from its 1.2-liter 3-cylinder PureTech engine. British buyers couldn't get enough of them. Underneath the bonnet, however, sits the exact same mechanical ticking time bomb, a rubber timing belt running directly in oil. Just like the Ford, the PureTech belt degrades, sheds rubber particles, and clogs the oil pump. But in the Peugeot, it gets even worse. The rubber debris also contaminates the vacuum pump that powers the braking system, leading to a sudden loss of brake servo assistance while driving. Independent garages are actively refusing to touch PureTech wet belt replacements. The reason is simple liability. If a garage replaces the belt for £900, but microscopic rubber fragments are already lodged deep inside the engine's internal oil galleries, the engine can still seize a few hundred miles down the road, and the customer naturally blames the garage. Dealerships across the country are now heavily discounting part exchange values on 3008s unless the owner can prove the belt has just been replaced, with trade values dropping by thousands of pounds. It is a textbook example of a great family car ruined by a catastrophic engineering shortcut. The wet belt is a complete disaster for used car buyers. But nothing else on this list comes close to the sheer financial devastation of our number 1 spot. Number 1, Land Rover Discovery Sport 2.0 Ingenium Diesel. This was supposed to be the pride of British engineering. The Discovery Sport promised prestige, unmatched all-weather capability, and the sheer luxury of a Land Rover badge for the price of a standard company car. Instead, the 2.0-liter Ingenium diesel engine has become the single most feared engine in modern UK motoring history. Because of flawed DPF regeneration programming, diesel fuel oil routinely washes past the piston rings and dilutes the engine oil in the sump. This diluted oil loses its lubricating properties, causing the timing chains to wear out at terrifying speed, often rattling violently before the car has even reached 40,000 miles. And where did Land Rover put that fragile timing chain? Right at the back of the engine, against the firewall. To replace the chain, the entire subframe, transmission, and engine must be dropped out of the bottom of the vehicle. If the chain snaps while driving on the motorway, the valves slam into the pistons, destroying the entire engine block in a fraction of a second. A preventative timing chain replacement at an independent specialist will set you back at least £2,000 to £2,500. A full engine replacement after a catastrophic failure will easily exceed £8,000 to £10,000 at a main dealership. Most general independent garages will flat out refuse to take the job on because it requires days of ramp time and specialized heavy equipment. Imagine paying £16,000 for a used luxury SUV to transport your family, only to be handed an £8,000 repair quote 12 months later while your PCP payments continue every single month. That is not just a breakdown, it is genuine financial ruin. What all of these SUVs have in common is a generation of car makers that prioritized aggressive laboratory emissions targets over real-world mechanical durability. They experimented with wet belts, overcomplicated boost systems, and buried timing chains, and then passed the financial consequences directly onto the unsuspecting British motorist. For everyday drivers, the days of fixing a family car for a couple of £100 at your local trusted workshop are disappearing fast for these specific models. The repair bills have simply grown bigger than the cars themselves. If you are currently browsing the used car market for a family SUV, do your homework. Look past the shiny paint, check the exact engine code, demand documented service records, and make sure you know exactly what is driving that camshaft before you sign on the dotted line. Which of these 6 SUVs shocked you the most? Has a local garage ever turned away one of your cars? Or have you experienced a wet belt nightmare firsthand? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe to the channel for more UK-focused automotive investigations, reliability reports, and honest used car buying guides.